Couldn't help but think watching the debate. It's been more than 2 weeks since we had an all too familiar stalemate in Congress, and it prevented the passage of common sense legislation. As a result, it triggered the across the board budget cuts that are better known as sequestration. These automatic budget cuts, when they first went into, became a possibility, everybody said, no, Congress will be irresponsible enough to just allow them to go into place. Well, in the weeks leading up to sequestration, we heard almost daily from federal agencies, defense contractors, members from both sides of the aisle about how harmful these cuts would be. Notwithstanding the talk about how ridiculous it would go to go for it, the deadline for intervention has come and gone. Now, much of the focus appears not to be upon the wide swath of harm that's beginning to descend on communities across the nation, but instead on the closure of White House tours and whether we're going to have the Easter egg roll. Come on. Mr. President, I would hope the American public, I'd hope the press, everybody else would focus on how serious these cuts are. In fact, I think to simply accept and avoid fixing this indiscriminate, harmful cuts is irresponsible. They're slowly being implemented. They've already begun to affect our states and communities. I was up in Vermont this weekend for 3 days. I was all over the state. And everywhere I went, just as I do every day, I hear from Vermonters about the consequences for their jobs, for their children, for their communities. I've heard from Vermont families that begin to plan for the furloughs. They're going to hit their family budgets. Through no fault of theirs. These are hardworking, honest Vermonters, but because Congress has failed to act. I've heard from community organizations about the difficult decisions they'll have to make in the weeks ahead. It should alarm everyone that reductions are expected, for example, the number of children being served by Head Start. I've heard from young scientists at the University of Vermont who've already been denied research grants because of sequestration. And Vermonters facing high rents are facing a 7-year wait for Section 8 housing assistance. Until the sequester is resolved, housing authorities in Vermont will not be granting any new rental vouchers. And hundreds of Vermonters are going to lose this vital lifeline. Put in reality, my home in Vermont overnight, we had 8 or 9 inches of snow. The next 24 hours, we'll have another 8 or 9 inches. I mean, once it got past 15 inches, we actually had schools that closed. This is very unusual. But think of the people who do not have housing, what that's doing to them. It's an unfortunate, needless reality. I've heard about the impact sequestration is having on our military families in Vermont, as some members of the National Guard prepare for furloughs. These are Guard members who called up and willing to serve in Iraq and Afghanistan, putting their lives on the line for America. But now they prepare for furloughs and reductions in staff that provide services to their families. And then we have the elimination of the Army Tuition Assistance Program, serving veterans, a promise we made to our men and women in uniform when they're willing to stand up and go into combat for America. Now, these are the impacts felt in the little state of Vermont so far. We haven't yet seen the coming consequence for Vermont schools and how sequestration will affect students and teachers. We haven't yet felt the true impact of funding for the grants to support our law enforcement people, our job search assistants, the Wheels on Meals programs, or those programs that provide life-saving vaccines. Members have filed amendments to the spending bill we're currently debating, to attempt to insulate and protect programs that impact their states most, but they want to do it at the cost of other states. We need to stop looking at how we can just save just a single program. Get back to the table. Negotiate a sensible, balanced approach that addresses deficit reduction in a responsible way, and on the backs of the most vulnerable Americans. We cannot simply cut our way out of this deficit. We created a situation partly by putting 2 wars on the nation's credit card. This morning, it was estimated the war in Iraq is going to cost $2 trillion. It's the first war in our nation's history where we went to war and said, we don't have to pay for it, we'll just borrow the money. Vietnam, Korea, very unpopular wars. We still pass the taxes to pay for it. Iraq, although it's going to be over in a matter of weeks, we don't have to pay for a year, 10 years later. Thousands of Americans killed and wounded, say nothing about our allies, and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis. And we're stuck with a $2 trillion bill and growing, all on borrowed money. The only people that paid a price in that war for America are the brave men and women who served there and their families. They paid a huge price. We don't have a draft, so most families didn't get touched by it. Certainly a lot of people who made a lot of money on that war, they didn't pay a price. And the people, including people who were in the administration at the time who lied to the Congress about what was there, weapons of mass destruction, connection with 9/11, things they knew were untrue. They simply lied about it, and we ended up having that war. There's $2 trillion. Don't tell me now the same people who voted for that war don't stand here and tell me how we got to take the money out of medical research in America to pay for it, how we have to take the money out of educating our children to pay for it, how we have to take the money out of seniors who need help to pay for it, how we have to take the money out of repairing our bridges and roads in America to pay for it. My answer to them is, you voted for that. You should have been willing to pay for it. We've already reduced the debt by $2.5 trillion. The vast majority of those savings coming from spending cuts. The American people want and expect us to take a balanced approach. They know it isn't wise to protect endless corporate loopholes and tax breaks for the wealthiest Americans instead of investing in our schools and our factories, our roads, our workers. You know, I think of the billions of dollars we spend on roads and bridges, for example, in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's one Vermonter who said, yes, spend billions to build roads and bridges in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then they blow them up. Build them here in the United States, in Vermont, or West Virginia, or Oklahoma. We Americans will take good care of them. There's a simple bottom line. Putting our fiscal house in order, which we should do, has to go hand in hand with targeted, common sense steps to promote economic growth, to create jobs, to strengthen the middle class, all things that President Obama, Democrats in both houses of Congress are eager to do. But we need some cooperation from the other side of the aisle. We need cooperation. Putting on mindless autopilot the crucial decisions about what should be our budget and growth priorities, that's a terrible and dishonest way to treat the American people. It's a recipe for economic dysfunction. It threatens tangible harm to millions of families, for communities across the nation. Difficult decisions are in front of us. Every single member of the Senate should go back and read their campaign promise. Oh, of course I'll face up to difficult questions. Really? We're stalled here. People want to filibuster rather than face difficult questions. Well, we have to face them. We can't punt them. We in Congress need to put aside talking points, turn to the task of replacing these harmful autopilot cuts with sensible and balanced budget decisions. Instead of slogans, let's have some substance. The American people expect more from Congress.